Going live on Facebook now.
Yeah, it's what at least it's what Zoom says. And I'm assuming everybody spends most of his working time sitting behind the screen these days, whether it's in Zoom or Teams or whatever. Quite astonishing last year when this whole COVID thing came over us and we all have to work remotely now. How few people actually still use Skype. Because imagine this happening like almost 2 or 3 years ago. I think a majority would have been on Skype.
Yeah,
But it's sort of gone. And even if I've been in maybe 1 or 2 sessions where we had to use Skype because of like really large corporations that were still sticking to Skype. But even if you start up your Skype, it's Microsoft saying, yeah, please use Teams. So it's sort of, yeah, we want to get rid of Skype. So several years ago, they bought it for an enormous amount of money. And now they want to get rid of it.
Who bought it? Microsoft bought Skype?
Yeah, several years ago.
Yeah, long time ago.
So I'll start the recording when we start the meetup. We've got about 5 minutes left. People can just.
Jamie, will you put a link somewhere after you recorded it?
Yeah, and I believe Gunther is going to post it on his YouTube channel. Is that right?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the recording afterwards. Yeah, you can put it somewhere on the Scrum Masters of the Universe YouTube, but I would love to put it on my YouTube. Yeah.
Yep. So I'll be posting it on the Scrum Masters of the Universe Facebook page. There's a Facebook page there that I actually just created yesterday. So we'll be posting that live there. Gunther will also be posting it on his YouTube channel. So we'll give you links for those things.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. Thank you.
Did you create a page to be able to broadcast live then?
I did.
Okay. Oh, cool.
Yeah. I actually wanted to do it through YouTube, but I had never done so before. And YouTube requires a 24-hour waiting period. And I didn't start working on it until 10 a.m. yesterday morning. So I thought 10 a.m. this morning would be cutting it too close. So I went with the Facebook route.
Okay, great. It's funny to see Alice already, because Alice will be joining my tomorrow and day after. I have a PSM class, and I believe Alice will be in my class, right?
Yes, that's great.
Yeah, cool. And I see Tosia or Antonina. She's from Poland. Another familiar name. She's currently translating my little book of Scrum, my pocket guide, into Polish.
Oh wow, that's awesome.
Yeah. So I see at least some familiar names. Okay, look.
And you're live on Facebook.
Working good.
Yeah.
There is a delay, I will tell you. If you're trying to watch both, there's a delay on the Facebook one. Jeez.
Great. And it still looks like we're still within your 100 people subscription.
Yeah, so far we're okay. We had 205 people sign up, so we'll see if so we created the Facebook Live as an overflow. I'll try to monitor the chat there if we do get over 100. If we don't, then we'll all be here, so that'll be fine too. All right. And we will be recording the session, so if you have any sensitivity about that, you can feel free to not turn on your camera. Otherwise, if you'd like to turn on your camera, that's great. We always like to see your face.
Yeah. Although I tend to fully understand if you don't want to be associated with me publicly.
Oh, no.
It's totally fine.
I don't think that's the case.
Yeah. Hi, Bernardo. I now know you're from Chile, not Spain. I remember. I learn sometimes.
Greetings, Gunther. Nice to see you again. Thank you, Jamie, for the invitation. So glad to be here again.
Coming.
And I think you literally have people from around the world. I've seen people from Germany, India, the US, I don't know, maybe Poland. Seen. Wow. That's one of the little advantages of the COVID thing, right? The fact that we now do all online, it means we can connect with people across the world.
Yeah, it's really brought about a lot of opportunities and really and really the reason behind the Scrum Masters of the Universe, it kind of gave us the ability to do that and connect globally as Scrum Masters and really
Yeah.
and other Agile professionals and getting out of our cultural silos even and tapping into kind of this collective intelligence globally. So it's really opened doors that weren't there before, or they were, but we just didn't use them, didn't take advantage of it, and COVID forced us to force our hand in it, and now people are just much more comfortable with it, right?
Yeah.
It's really nice.
You also have to feel that it's one of those things I've done with, in a way, thanks to COVID, lots of things that I now think I should have done that anyhow.
Yes,
Because
exactly.
it's just the crisis that made me do it, but even without the crisis, those are really valuable things that I should have invested or explored anyhow.
Exactly. I think even companies are realizing that and realizing what an incredible talent pool that's out there that they can tap into by offering remote work options. So I think the landscape of working from home has changed forever now. It will never,
Yeah,
I don't
cool.
believe it will go back to the way it was pre-COVID.
Quite amazing to see people from Saudi Arabia, Chile, we already knew,
Oh, these
India.
from all
Quite
over the
incredible.
world. I see some familiar
Yeah.
faces. Katrin,
Yeah.
hello. Angie, hello. I see some Claire's here. And
But
some new
you do know, Jamie,
Amy.
that in order to live up to your expectations with Scrum Masters of the universe, you're missing some extraterrestrial attendance.
Yeah, didn't we just send something to Mars? I wonder if we have anybody from Mars here.
Raise a hand if you're from Mars.
Well,
I think there might be a delay in the communication, but
especially if you're trying to watch the Facebook live feed at the same time. There's about a 5 or 10 second delay.
oh, okay. And I think Dirk Fabricius is pretending as if he's from.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, you wanted some extraterrestrials, so.
That
Here we are. Cool.
scary. All right, welcome everyone. We're gonna wait just another minute here as some others join us. In the meantime, I'm gonna say thank you to Gunther for joining us today at Scrum Masters of the Universe. My name is Jamie Kriegel,
Jeff,
and
do we start with you as usual? Anything from you?
oh, I think someone needs to mute maybe.
No, Jeff.
Okay, well, we'll try again. Welcome everyone. I'm Jamie Kriegel, and welcome to Scrum Masters of the Universe for our February meetup here with, today we have Gunther Verheyen, who hardly needs an introduction, at least to me. He's, but I will try. I don't know if I can do an introduction I can give an introduction that will do him justice. I greatly admire him. Gunther started practicing Scrum back in 2003, and he's published 2 best-selling books about Scrum. He's partnered with Ken Schwaber, who's a co-creator of Scrum, and has worked with a lot of diverse teams and organizations. In 2011, he became a professional Scrum trainer with Scrum.org, and in 2013, you'll have to help me to how to pronounce this. I know I won't get this right. Is it Ullizee?
Yeah, sort of. That's good.
Okay, sort of. He's a member of the Ullizee is a member of the professional training network of Scrum.org, partnering exclusively with Ken Schwaber, co-creator of Scrum. He managed the professional Scrum series and shepherded Scrum.org's network of professional Scrum trainers. Gunther co-created Agility Path, EBM, which is evidence-based.
Big shout out to everyone.
And the Nexus framework for scaled professional Scrum. Gunther created the acclaimed book Scrum: A Pocket Guide, which I have to tell you, published this in 2013, and then this is the 2nd edition, which was published in 2019. And did I hear right that a 3rd edition is coming in 2021?
Yeah, it should be available at least in print in a few weeks' time. I know from experience that it's going to take a couple of more weeks for it to become available via Amazon and in Kindle format and so on. But let's say before the end of March, it should be available. Yeah, the third edition.
I'm excited. This really is a beautiful companion to the Scrum Guide. It's a book I've used to help me understand the why behind what we're doing. It's one of the best on the market, so I highly recommend it. And it sounds like maybe wait a couple weeks and get the third edition, but great value in that. Also, in 2020, last year, Gunther published the book 97 Things. Well, he curated this book of 97 Things Every Scrum Practitioner Should Know, which is it's a collection of essays from field experts all across the world. I highly recommend. As you can see, it's well loved by me with lots of Post-its and a lot of wisdom packed in that book. So I highly, if you don't have this already, I highly recommend this book. So without further ado, you didn't come here to hear me speak, but we're gonna hear Gunther. Gunther, thank you so much for joining us.
Okay, thank you for the very kind introduction, Jamie, and thank you even more for inviting me here, and also asking me to speak about the topic about inspection without adaptation thing. It's cool. It made me think about different things to talk about. So that's really nice. So thank you very, very much. What a great crowd we have. Probably the biggest crowd I've seen in a while, certainly in the online meetups that started growing last year due to the COVID thing. So thanks very much. I've prepared a couple of things, so allow me to share that with you guys. And I'll still give you a little bit of a talk. So I think, Jamie, at some point in time, you saw this blog note of mine. I think it's from last year or so, I don't know, saying inspection without adaptation is pointless in Scrum. Sorry, in the text, I also mentioned that inspection without adaptation actually is an act of futility. It's something futile. It leads to, at most, some sense of pretend agility. And that I believe, Jamie, that resonated with you, which is why you invited me to elaborate on the topic a little bit more. So I'm really happy to do that with all those beautiful Scrum Masters of the universe. Almost feels like a sort of a title of a movie, Gunther and the Scrum Masters of the universe. So I believe we could make a movie out of that.
Well, I think that the topic originally spoke to me because we're really good at inspection. That's what I've decided. We're great at inspection. During our retrospectives, we're really great at finding what's wrong or what needs to change. And we identify it, but what I find is that there's a lack of follow through. And we miss that second part of adaptation. So that's really why this topic spoke to me, Gunther. So thank you for
you're welcome. But even I totally feel what you're saying. We're very good at observing things that are not correct or whatever, but without suggesting what to do with it. There was also something I had when another topic that I've been talking about 1 or 2 years ago is what I call the illusion of agility. Why that comes about, what it means, illusion of agility. But again, inspection without adaptation is pointless. The inspection, let's say, observation of the illusion of agility makes no sense if you don't try to suggest at least potential ways to deal with that. So act on the observation. So that's really cool. So let me share a little bit. You just introduced me beautifully, Jamie, indeed. Can't go over my career, don't want to go over a career anyhow. It's almost a career by accident. For some reason, 17 years ago, over 17 years ago, my life of Scrum started. Although my life of Scrum actually didn't start with Scrum, which is looking back was a really good thing. Sounds crazy, but my life of Scrum started with extreme programming back in 2003, and then we wrapped extreme programming in Scrum, and then I've never did anything else since those days or that time. So I'm still passionate about it. And it may be also an illustration of the little picture I'm showing you. This is a little box I have in my home office here in Antwerp in Belgium, where I live and where I work, mostly at home. And again, this is a statement that resonated with me a long time ago when I found it, so I glued it on the wall over here. In the meantime, I found out that it's from George Bernard Shaw, so the famous novelist. It says life isn't about finding yourself, it's about creating yourself. And that resonated with me because I think it also has for me sort of the agile spirit and even the spirit of Scrum. So I even like to translate this into Scrum is not about finding it. Don't try to find Scrum, create Scrum, create your Scrum. So, but it resonated with me because like Jamie, like you said, I've worked for a couple of years from 2013 until 2016 with Ken Schwaber at Scrum.org. And when I left Scrum.org back in 2016, so it's again 5 years ago, imagine time flies when you're having fun. And I left Scrum.org, and back in 2013, when I went to work with Ken, I had established that little company that you pronounced so beautifully, Jamie. It's called Ullizee-Inc. I've added the Inc as a sort of joke because I'm just a one-person company, and I had to think of a title for myself. And totally against my nature, sometimes I like to be intuitive about things and just go on for my instinct. And it just popped up in my head, yeah, I feel like I'm a Scrum Caretaker. So rather than calling myself the CEO of my company or the director, whatever, one-person company, sort of silly to call yourself the CEO of yourself. So I decided to choose a title that reflects what I think I am. A Scrum Caretaker. I added independent Scrum Caretaker to that to make sure that people really understood well that I'm not part of any fixed structure, which was that was a conscious decision. And then, you know, life is about creating yourself. So I found out, oh, I feel like I'm a Scrum Caretaker. I didn't know that 17 years ago when I started with Scrum. It's something I discovered for myself. Another thing I discovered for myself is I always had this feeling that it's whatever I do, it's about people first, always. And discovering back in 2003 Scrum, together with Extreme Programming, helped me realize that even more. Because even before that, it was about people, human beings, so beautiful to work with. And then my purpose of Scrum, that evolved into, or I at least I've discovered a way to better express that, humanizing the workplace with Scrum. And over the past year, thanks to COVID, I've been able to speak on tons of online meetups like this one or keynotes at events and so on. And it was a lot about what I mean with humanizing the workplace with Scrum. You might have seen it, they're on my YouTube channel if you want. So quite happy, Jamie, that you now invited me to, now let's talk Scrum. And let's talk about inspection without adaptation. It's a good thing because I couldn't reuse any of the materials that I have. I had to create something totally new for you, which is great. Now, what I was able to reuse was my sort of my little personal definition of Scrum, something I created last year again, thanks to COVID in a way, because about a year ago, March, April, I don't know how it was for you guys, but all of my work just disappeared like that. My assignments, my consulting work, the classes I had planned, it all just disappeared. It just went up in sort of in smoke. So it took me a couple of weeks to get over that. And then what am I going to do with my time? So I wrote a little paper. It's called Moving the Scrum Downfield, because I truly feel that the time has come to actually do that, moving your Scrum, our Scrum, whatever, but also moving Scrum downfield. I feel like we're grinding too much. And in that paper, I called Scrum a simple framework that enables people to derive value from complex challenges. I've been talking a lot about humanizing the workplace, so focusing on the people aspect a lot, still important. But let's talk here about just another aspect of Scrum. And for me, my definition was sort of important because it has 4 key words for me: simple versus complex, meaning the simplicity of Scrum versus complex challenges, and then people and value. So let me go into that a little bit more, because I hope my definition also reflects that Scrum, in a way, is what I like to call, Scrum was built, created, designed, whatever you want to call it. Scrum was designed upon the premise that the work that we do, and when Scrum was created back in the 90s, it was mainly done for software development. So let's for the time being, let's just say that Scrum was created on the premise that software development is actually highly complex work. It is not industrial work. It is not manufacturing work. In that sense, it is creative work, not industrial work. And that has huge consequences, because it meant that, certainly by then already, that we were applying the wrong approach, because complexity has actually huge consequences. Because Scrum is designed to help us deal with complex challenges. And nowadays, Scrum is being used not just for software development, but in lots of other domains too, which is a good thing. Which is funny. I was recently talking to a CEO of a company here in Belgium, and he said, you know what? Strange thing is, Gunther, that as CEOs and CXO people, we're now looking at software development people to help us explain about Scrum. I think, wow, that must be unique in history that people from other domains are now looking at software development and Scrum people as an example. But you know what? In society, the amount of complexity is growing enormously. And a lot of the activities, certainly in modern society, are actually highly complex, meaning they are quite unpredictable. There's a lot of unpredictability. There's a lot of uncertainties. And beyond that, complex challenges are what I call dynamic, meaning they are not static. They are not fixed. And complex problems have this nasty tendency to what I call change shape as we try to address or try to tackle them. So they continuously change. They're moving. They're changing shape. And think just of software development. If you're in that world, think about requirements, user expectations, markets, competitors, technologies change. Not to talk about things that might happen or not happen, like interfaces not being available, APIs, people dependencies. The world is changing, markets are changing, our companies are changing direction, changing strategies. You might have unexpected snowstorms suddenly sweeping the land and coming over you. There's a lot of things happening. And that is essential to really understand Scrum. But again, it brings us to the topic of adaptation. You need adaptation, being able to adapt. That is what we need, because the problems that we are facing and the challenges that we're trying to tackle and address with Scrum, they change shape all the time. It means you can't upfront predict what you're going to do. And that is important in complexity. And you know, this is yesterday what I pulled from the internet, the 10-day weather forecast of Pella, Iowa, of all places. It's sort of a home base of the Scrum Masters of the universe. There's a reason why we call the weather thing a forecast, because you think you can look into the future, and we're trying to collect tons and tons of data from the past and models and mathematical models and so on. But we'll probably never be able to exactly predict the future of the weather. It's not a prediction that we can make. Now, we call it a forecast. We might increase the level of predictability a little bit by having more data and more past observations, but it will never turn into a prediction because it's a highly complex thing. There's a lot of things influencing the weather. We can run it through as many all parameters and variables of the last couple of days and the last couple of weeks through lots of mathematical things, and we will never be able to make an exact prediction. And the same happens in our world, software development, all of our complex challenges. Think about it. There's a reason why we've started using the word forecast in Scrum. So we forecast the work for a sprint. We try to make forecasts maybe on the open or the future product backlog, but it's a forecast. It's like the weather. It's not a prediction. We can't exactly predict. We can try to increase predictability based on observation past, some sense of stability, maybe stable teams and so on. But it will always be sort of like the weather. It's a forecast. And the farther away you look into the future, the more uncertain and the less predictable it actually is. So that's why in Scrum we organize all work in sprints. So maybe we can try to make even that we call a forecast. Maybe we can try to think about what do you think we can handle in the next 2 or 3 or maybe 4 weeks of work. But it's still a forecast because it's like the weather. You can suddenly have a snowstorm coming over you. And there goes your plan. There go all of your ambitions. So accepting the fact that it's a forecast, that's still step one. Then the next step is also not just accepting that it's a forecast, but also accepting changes. Imagine a lot of traditional organizations, not to talk of sort of traditional managers, at least managers without too many leadership skills, let's say. They would say, like in large parts of the US now, you would see a snowstorm coming over the land, and a lot of people in our world, when in our world our projects, our product development are okay, quickly unmuting myself. In a lot of things in our world, people would actually deny that there's a snowstorm coming over our projects. Terrible things are happening, gone wrong, whatever. And then people say, yeah, you know what? It's springtime. It shouldn't be snow. No. There's no snowstorm, whatever. Pretend as if there's no snowstorm. Yeah, but you know what? Look out the window. So we sort of really good at ignoring change, ignoring unforeseen events, ignoring unforeseen conditions. No, pretend as if it's not happening, and then you're sent out in a snowstorm in your shorts and your t-shirt and whatever. It's not really working out. So complexity, forecasting work, and then openness for change, because that's actually the ability to adapt, right? It includes openness for change. So it has some value. Now, that's an absolute premise for me to really understand Scrum. It's about tackling complexity. That sort of changes the game completely. There's more premises that I believe are really important. The good thing is that in our ability to change, to adapt to new circumstances, new insights, experience, observations, changes that are coming over, like snowstorm, whatever, we have, as human beings, the natural ability to adapt. Because in our personal lives, we do that all the time, like in the case of a snowstorm. It just seems very strange that in our professional environments, that natural ability that we have to adapt is being blocked. It's impeded, limited, whatever. It seems that we can't use it. No, stick to the plan. No, it's supposed to be spring, whatever, this time of weather, in this part of the land, we're in the sunny state. No, it's impossible that there's a snowstorm. Yeah, just observe, look outside. No. You know what? And then we have this thing called Agile transformations. And we go into Agile transformations, and we're going to tell people that you now have to be Agile. And that's sort of strange because people are naturally Agile. How about acknowledging, embracing, capitalizing on the fact that people are naturally Agile? You don't have to tell them how to be Agile. They already are. How about building on that? And that's for me the essence of Scrum. Scrum is a process. It's a servant process, what I call it in my book. It's not a commanding process. I also like to call it a skeleton process sometimes. It's a framework. Scrum for me is a process or a framework that builds on that natural ability of people to adapt. We don't have to tell people to adapt. What we do is we structure it, we streamline it, we give it a bit of structure, because in our professional environments, something that's really helpful. Yeah? And what do we use for that with Scrum? That's what I call Scrum's DNA. So underneath the framework, with the rules and the artifacts and all of the beautiful principles, there's two things underlying that. Two, in a way, could call it management principles. So Scrum implements what we call empiricism based upon self-organization. So we acknowledge, we embrace, we capitalize on the fact that people have the natural ability to adapt. So we give them a context, a situation where they can actually apply that. So we thrive, we build on the self-organizing capabilities of people, of human beings. And sort of more like the process aspect of that is an empiricism. That's what we're talking about today, obviously, inspection, adaptation. Yeah. So Scrum builds on people's ability to adapt. And then the biggest challenge of a lot of Scrum and Agile transformations that I see, at least, I don't know how your experience is that that structure should follow that process of Scrum, which in turn follows the natural ability of people to adapt. In that sense, you can't, in a way, properly, I don't like that word, but you can't properly implement Scrum without rethinking the structures around Scrum, without rethinking silos, departments, processes, governance, procedures, bureaucracy, anything, whatever, silo-based systems and so on. So in that sense, a lot of Agile transformations should be turned sort of upside down. Now, start with accepting, acknowledging, building on the fact that people are naturally Agile. You don't have to tell them, and you don't need 50 Agile coaches in your company to tell people to now be Agile. Create a context, create a situation that allows people to use that, structure it with Scrum, and then as you go along, rethink your structures around Scrum. Empiricism and self-organization. And again, that's again an implementation of inspection adaptation. So people want to implement Scrum or become more agile, and they want to do it in a fixed way, sort of cookbook way, following a menu, following copy-pasting what other people are doing, other organizations are doing. What about learning? What about falling, getting back up? What about inspecting? Oh, this is working, this is not working. What about some small forms of experimentation and then moving forward through such a transformation in an iterative, incremental way? Again, it's all about inspection adaptation. So, and that's what use Scrum to implement Scrum, sort of the idea. So it's what I miss in a lot of situations. And then think in terms of Scrum, think what I call ecosystem. So try to move to a structure that is not fixed, not rigid. So Scrum is, in a way, to use maybe old school language, is in a way a product management process. It's a framework on how to manage all work that needs to happen for a product. And I think of product in a broader sense. It might be a service, might be digital, might be online, might be a physical product, whatever. So products and services. Product is at the heart of Scrum. That's why we have a product owner. That's why we have a product backlog. And now think about creating or rethinking your structures to evolve towards creating an ecosystem around a product. And that in itself builds on the process of Scrum. So within the ecosystem, you thrive on the empirical process. So just think about it. A bit of a faraway future, although we could have, I feel we could have been a lot further than we actually are. And I don't know, but probably most people know that we got the name Scrum from sports, the game of rugby. And how did we end up with that name? And in this as a name for a software development and now sort of complex management framework. It's from an old paper. It's from 1986. It was called the New Product Development Game. So that self-organization aspect of that part of Scrum's DNA is rooted a lot in that paper. 6 characteristics, self-organizing teams. But what that paper also says, sort of the role of management in that. Yeah? So in my thinking, that product hub, that ecosystem around the product, that sort of thrives on Scrum as, let's say, a sort of internal operating system. That such a product hub operates what is called in the new product development game, sort of like a startup. They set their own agenda, they take their own initiatives, and it's all based on Scrum, meaning organizing all work in sprints and using sprints to continuously think about what are we going to do, what do we want to do, how are we going to do that, why are we doing this, and continuously balance that. Again, that picture is from moving your Scrum downfield. I noticed when Jamie invited me to think about this, and I was creating this last week and got a pretty busy schedule. I noticed I went back to that paper a lot. I've got a reference somewhere too. Now, 1986, 2 Japanese professors, Nonaka Tokochi, described what we now call Scrum, the characteristics of self-organizing teams. And the role of management is like acting as an investor. they called it venture capitalist, but it sounds a little bit aggressive. So I like the investor stance a little bit more, but at least not intervening on a daily basis, helping teams, helping Scrum teams, helping product owners, helping such an ecosystem around the product with guidance, money, budget, funding, moral support, sort of managing in a way from the outset. So if you think about that, expanding that idea of an ecosystem, what if your agile transformation would focus on inspecting and adapting towards creating a product hub, a next product hub, a third, whatever, and gradually transforming, literally transforming your rigid pyramid, whatever type organization, rethinking the structures around Scrum into a networked organization of a network of product hubs. And that would create a sort of agile organization, because and a product hub might expand, it might shrink, it might disappear, you might create a new one. And again, the role of management becomes that sort of purpose of the organization, part of that distribution of leadership, working with product hubs, but again, at the outset. And then in that paper, I described also, because that's quite important, management, and let's say in general terms for external people, anybody outside of the Scrum teams, or in a way even potentially sort of on the edge or outside of the ecosystem, sprint is the unit of time. It is in Scrum, looking at the Scrum system from the outside, it should be about sprint, team, and that's it. What is team? And potentially, hopefully, also about value, not just estimates and so on. Yeah? So there's a role for management, but stop intervening on a daily basis. And it lies a little bit with the idea that what happens in a sprint should stay in a sprint. It's nothing for management, how people perform in a world of self-organization, where people are asked, even not just asked, but invited, inspired, almost provoked sometimes, and in a positive way, to organize their own work. But in sprints, risk mitigation is not from breathing down people's neck on a daily basis. It's from managing at the outset. I'll come back on that. And that does include that whatever happens in the sprint stays in the sprint. Create some sense of safety. Now, touched upon some topics of inspection without adaptation, maybe a couple of times, maybe the larger scale, the macro scale, the organization, rethinking structures and so on. Now, it's actually also really, really important, obviously, in Scrum itself. Now, let's go to Scrum. So Scrum defines what happens in the sprint. That's it. What you do that, how you embed that in probably larger structures, or hopefully not phases, but you never know. It's totally up to you. Scrum has no definition for that. Scrum defines what happens in the sprint, and how you use that and for what purpose. That's a decision you can make. Yeah? And every sprint, as we know, starts with sprint planning. Now, talking about inspection without adaptation. What happens a lot, what I see at least happening a lot in sprint plannings, people are under pressure. Those events, what we call events in Scrum, actually opportunities to inspect and adapt. That's a bit too much to say every time, so let's call them events. A lot of organizations see them as meetings, boring things where people are dragged into, don't want to be, and so on. And we have this natural tendency to try to limit having to be in meetings as much as possible. Now, sprint planning, a lot of organizations see that as overhead. It's a meeting. We want to avoid spending too much time in meetings, but those events are actually important. They're opportunities to inspect so that we can perform an adaptation. And at sprint planning, that means inspecting the current state of product backlog, looking at how much work did we typically get done in the past, looking at the sprint, who will be available, who not, sort of capacity or capability of people, capacity. What have we done before? What is our definition of done, and so on? And the goal is to think about the upcoming sprint, some sort of first idea of a plan for the sprint, which is what we call the sprint backlog. Now, a lot of teams that I meet, they try to limit their sprint plan to, half an hour, maybe an hour. That's already a lot of time. And then they limit themselves to just the inspection part of sprint planning, meaning quickly looking at product backlog together with the product owner, because also the product owner is a really busy person. He wants to leave the meeting after, like, let's say, less than an hour already. So a lot of those teams that I've seen, they end up their sprint planning with just selecting what are we going to do? What do we think we're going to do from product backlog? So that's merely the sort of inspection part. The adaptation part is the outcome of sprint planning should be sprint goal, knowing what's the purpose of the sprint, why are you having that sprint? Why is that an important sprint? What is so important about the work that you're selecting, that you're pulling into the sprint? But also some first idea, how are we going to tackle the sprint in sprint backlog? Because see a lot of teams ending up with very chaotic sprints because they don't think about the how yet at sprint planning. And I know that in the past we've said we're totally against upfront planning, and we still are, but we're against, it's called big upfront planning. Planning 3 months, 6 months, 9 months ahead in time, making large Gantt charts. That's what we're opposed to, because that's not like the idea of complexity, you know, the weather forecast. How can you make a weather forecast for the next year or the next calendar year? You can't do that for software development either. But we never said that you can't look forward. It's even the opposite. All of the Scrum events are designed to be forward-looking. So sprint planning is about taking a little bit of time to look forward to the sprint that you're starting, that you're kicking off. And that does mean, as a team, a group of developers thinking about, yeah, what are we going to do? How do we think this will impact the design, the architecture, what infrastructure, the tooling that we're going to use, holding the what against the definition of done. What do we need to do to get that work really in a state of done? So sprint planning is not just about the what, that's even only the inspection point. The adaptation, the outcome of sprint planning should be a sprint backlog, first idea. It is a living artifact. That means it can, and it probably will, and actually it should almost change within the sprint. But having some idea on how are we going to tackle this work. At least I know a lot of teams that have found a lot of value in also thinking about the how at sprint planning. Now, a long time ago in the definition of Scrum, that was more clear. I don't know if anybody remembers. I'm an old guy, so I can say that. A long time ago, we used to prescribe that sprint planning should have 2 parts. Part 1 was about sort of the what, and part 2 was about the how. So I think we've rightfully eliminated that instruction of separating those things, first the what completely, and then the how for the what completely, because people iterate over that continuously, and that's a much better way of working. But it seems that by eliminating that very specific instruction, a lot of teams and people have lost the idea that sprint planning is also about the how. So think about it. All developers are there. So we've got the all sorts of skills and expertise available to think about the how and look forward to the sprint. I know quite some teams where that avoids a lot of confusion and even chaos. So sprint planning, it's about adaptation, and the adaptation, I like to see that as outcome of sprint planning. So we no longer say in Scrum how to run your sprint planning. We say that the main input into sprint planning, the main source of observation and inspection is your current state of product backlog, together with some variables that you want to use in your inspection, meaning past performance, upcoming capacity, and so on. But the goal should be to create a tangible outcome, a first version of sprint backlog, so they can get to work and at least have some alignment and agreement, shared agreement within the team of how are we going to tackle this? What do we think we might encounter, rather than allowing that to sort of chaotically pop up during the sprint.
So wait, Gunther, before you move on, at sprint planning, as you invited me to kindly interrupt you, there are a couple questions about sprint planning. Are you ready for those?
Yep, absolutely. Go ahead.
Sure. One asked, the team is aware of the next priority product backlog items, but there's not a sprint goal. So what happens in this scenario? Can you kindly give some examples for sprint goals?
Yeah, well, a sprint goal, first of all, is an outcome of the sprint. it's often people think sprint goal is something for the product owner. It's an outcome of sprint planning, meaning something at least between the developers, the group of developers, and the product owner. And in that sense, it's for the Scrum team. So sprint goal is an outcome of the sprint. It's thinking about what is sort of our goal. Why is this in let's say from a product owner perspective? It's almost thinking about what if I would have to convince people about investing in this sprint? What would I say to make sure that people understand, yeah, this is a worthwhile sprint, this is a valuable sprint. Sort of overarching purpose. That might be sometimes maybe the more boring sort of a summary of the functionality that you think you're going to handle. Sometimes one of the most funny sprint goals that I read about, never applied it, was at some point in time I read about a team that's now in a while they had what they call a Paris Hilton sprint, meaning a sprint with a lot, not too many deep changes. Some superficial updates, whatever. Let's not go too deeply into technical stuff and so on. Makes sense to them. I also had to read about it, but that sort of things. That might be strange, a silly example, or straightforward example. Maybe at some sort of, imagine a web shop where at some point in time you want to include maybe a shopping basket or a checkout procedure with payment options. And let me try to use that example to also show the purpose of a sprint goal. Imagine somebody wants to, this sprint, we're going to make sure that the goal of this sprint is to make payment possible. That as from now on, customers can select something, put in a shopping basket, whatever, and actually pay for it. And that might be the purpose of the sprint, payment options or a payment. And then throughout the sprint, that's the goal of sprint goal, people might discover, oh my God, forecast, we're not going to be able. So from product backlog, they selected work to include credit card payments in different types of cards, maybe PayPal payments, other sorts of payment, bank transfers, a check, paying at the door, whatever. And then throughout the sprint, they discovered, oh my God, we selected our forecast for that reason, snowstorm sweeping our team rather than the sunny spring type of weather that we have now in Belgium. So during the sprint, the team finds out, oh my God, we're not going to be able to do it all. And that might be, they might stick to their sprint goal, meaning there must be some sort of payment option, but maybe they won't do, I don't know, not bank transfer and only limit themselves to PayPal, or maybe only limit themselves to one credit card type instead of all credit card types and so on. So in a way, the sprint goal remains stable, but the way that they fulfill the sprint goal might be variable. And that's for me more important, the purpose of a sprint goal. So I like, Jamie, how you started today with referring to my little book, my pocket guide about a better understanding of the purpose of Scrum. Well, let me stick again to the purpose of a sprint goal, some sort of shared direction for the sprint. So sprint goal together with what and how. So what, how, and why, that's being negotiated and developed and discovered throughout sprint planning.
So if you, another question was, if you have multiple features in a sprint that are not coherent, how do you come up with sprint goals for that sprint? And along those lines, do all items in the sprint backlog have to relate back to the sprint goal? So I guess they're kind of related.
Yeah. Well, my view would be to turn it around. So if you discover that you have a lot of incohesive functionality selected for the sprint, try to think something that is cohesive. So you will have difficulties in finding what's the sprint goal, what's sort of the commonality in all those features and functionalities. And if you find out that there's not enough commonality, why not turn it around? Look for things that have commonality, that have some sort of shared ID, so that you create cohesion for the sprint. It's also in the advantage of a product owner. So I would sort of turn it around. If throughout sprint planning, you find out developers in the conversation with the product owner, but this is not related to very thing. That might be your view of a Paris Hilton sprint. But you don't want every sprint to turn into a Paris Hilton sprint of unrelated, whatever, superficial things. So look for cohesion first. And try to identify what work from product backlog would add value given, this is our why for the sprint. So in that sense, turn it around.
So if you, another question that came through is if the sprint backlog changes mid-sprint or, partially through the sprint so much that the sprint goal is no longer applicable, what would you advise the team to do?
Well, the official rule, obviously, we all know that a product owner can cancel a sprint, doesn't have to, and it says only in very serious circumstances. And one of them is officially described in Scrum Guide as the sprint goal is endangered. Now, honestly, I've never had, in my 70 years, we have never been to a cancelled sprint. Our way of dealing with a lot of changes throughout the sprint is to renegotiate, talk to the product owner, think about, is there anything else we can do? Can we stick to the goal of the sprint? And what else should we do with the goal of the sprint? If the goal of the sprint really becomes obsolete, the official rule is obviously to sort of potentially cancel the sprint. I don't like that. I like to keep working the rhythm of sprints and then renegotiate. Just figure out with the product owner what is most other valuable work that we can do given the seriously changing circumstances. So again, inspect so that you can adapt. Use your brains, use your creativity. Look at the time, what is happening, what is important, because canceling a sprint, terminating a sprint early, that's really, that doesn't feel good at all. So the only great example I've ever heard from a person talking about terminating a sprint early was, I think, a financial corporation in the city of London, somewhere during the financial crisis of over 10 years ago, when in the middle of a sprint, sort of the company went down the drain. And everybody started getting text messages and so on. They were looking at their shares and the value of their shares and so on, and the valuation of the company. And they decided to just cancel the sprint because it didn't make any sense at all to continue. So, and then again, to be really honest, it's not a clause, it's not a trade, whatever. Most teams I know, if not all teams, have a lot more serious problems to fix first before me bashing them on not having a sprint goal. It has to do with composition of team, stability, forward, other ways of not having focus and so on. So, yeah.
So we'll just ask one more question on sprint planning, then we'll let you continue. But we had one person, Dirk asked, what if the dev team, how do you handle them not stepping on each other's feet because they're all working on the same stuff, checking out the same scope code because of the sprint goal? Like not everything can be mob programmed. So how do you handle that if they're all working towards the same sprint goal in terms of development?
Yeah. Well, just to be clear, Scrum doesn't say how you should work together. So from my background in extreme programming, I've got really good experience with something we call pair programming. That means two people creating all production code collaboratively with different perspectives so that it's not overhead and it's not more expensive. Scrum doesn't say that you have to do pair programming. Scrum doesn't say that you have to do mob programming because that term was used. Scrum puts the collective accountability on the group of developers, which we used to call the development team. So they're collectively accountable. And that's part of self-organization. If you want management to sort of stay out of your sprint, nobody's going to tell you as a group of intelligent, creative people who should be doing what at what point of time in the sprint. But you're working against the collective purpose of creating one or multiple usable increments that are releasable. And who's going to do what? That's totally up to that group of people. That's why we call it a team still. So nobody's going to decide it for them. It's for them to figure out. And it's sort of maybe a good segue to maybe the next topic. So let me pull this into the next topic, because we say that as a group of people, group of developers, they have all of the expertise, the skills, whatever, to turn work from the product backlog into releasable increments. And one of the only limits or expectations, requirements, whatever boundaries that they work within, as from Scrum, one of the rules that they work against is that, you know what, nobody's going to tell you who should be doing what at what point of time in a sprint, but we want you to at least check in with each other at least on a daily basis. That's why we have in Scrum this thing called a daily Scrum. Now again, inspection without adaptation. Remember, adaptation outcome of sprint planning is having a sprint backlog. It's a plan for the sprint. Now, nothing is perfect. Nothing can be completely planned up front in every possible detail and exhaustively, not just for 2 weeks. Imagine you can't even predict the weather for 10 days. Imagine predicting a software development or a complex endeavor for the next 2 or 3 weeks. That's why we want people to be open for change even within the sprint. That's why we call sprint backlog a living artifact. It will change. And a way for a group of intelligent, whatever, creative developers to inspect upon themselves is via the daily Scrum. But again, it should not just be inspection. The goal, the essential goal of the daily Scrum is for a group of people to collectively find out for themselves, check in with each other, and then find out what are we going to do during until the next daily Scrum. Realigning, syncing with each other. So, and I think a lot of people recognize that, certainly when they follow the format of the 3 questions for the daily Scrum, which by the way is no longer mandatory. It wasn't mandatory already in the Scrum Guide update of 2016, 17, and it was now removed from the Scrum Guide in 2020. So in Scrum, we no longer prescribe or instruct how to run the daily Scrum. A lot of people still use the 3 questions. So let me take them as an example. It seems that a lot of teams think, or team members at least think, that if they come to the daily Scrum and they quickly answer the 3 questions, yeah, I'm done now. Yeah, I'm sharing what I've done. I'm sharing what I am going to do, and I'm sharing my nasty whatever problems with the Scrum Master. That's not the goal of the daily Scrum. It's not even about the syntax. It's about, as a group of people, finding out, what have you done yesterday? What have you done? Yeah, I was planning to do this today. Oh no, don't do that yet because I'm not ready yet. Oh, if I can't do that, what else should I do? What else can I do to contribute to the team and help us make the best possible progress towards the sprint goal and implementing the forecast? Because again, the word forecast, the selection of product backlog that goes into the sprint is what we call the forecast. The forecasted functionality, the forecast. So on a daily basis, check in with each other to see where you stand, but even more, adapt in that sense, identify what is everybody going to work on for the next 24 hours, let's say until the next daily Scrum. And that is quite important. So if the question was about how are they going to figure out who's going to do what? Well, we can't tell them, and no external force, whatever, can tell a team of developers who should be doing what. They should figure that out for themselves. One of the things I've seen with a lot of daily Scrums, so let me stop sharing the screen right now, and because you might see that I've got my flip chart here. So let me, for now, stop sharing the screen, and can I use my flip chart and draw something up? It's a very strange finding I had, certainly over the past couple of years, and certainly working with a lot of large organizations. So I've been visiting a lot of teams, and they all use something that is called a sprint burnout chart. And I'm going to assume that a lot of people know it, but let me quickly share my observations. So we all know what a sprint burnout chart is. It's a chart showing the remaining work within the sprint across time, meaning across the sprint. Yeah. So a sprint burnout chart has 2 axes. This is sprint backlog work. Yeah. So that might be tasks, that might be some sort of activities, that might be just the selected product backlog items, whether they are expressed as user stories or not. That might be the selection of user stories, that might be just a forecast for them. And then they have the axis of time, which is a sprint. And as you all know, time boxing work in Scrum means that sprints is the only event as a container event of the others. We just talked about sprint planning, daily Scrum. All those events within a sprint, they have a max time box, but they can be shorter. As we all know, sprints themselves have a fixed time box, meaning not longer, not short. And then we have several days within the sprint. And you have a certain amount of work. So you enter the sprint, you leave sprint planning with some sort of idea about how much work you think you can or should handle in the sprint. It's a task, whatever activities, anything for the selected product backlog items. And in a way, what you would expect from a sprint burnout chart is to be a visual management tool, meaning a visual self-management tool. In that sense, you would hope that it would show over time throughout the sprint, as on a daily basis, the team gathers and checks in with each other and see what is still valid from our sprint backlog, what is not valid. Oh, we think we need to do more work there. We don't have to do that anymore. Oh, damn, we totally underestimated that. We overestimated. There are changes. But at least at some point throughout the sprint, the idea is to look for how much work do we think we can handle in the sprint. Yeah, and that's sort of the idea. Now, sometimes you might end up in the situation that your progress is better than expected, when suddenly it turns out spring, when you're just coming out of a snowstorm, and then again it seems that, oh, our trend line, because burnout chart is a trend line over the open amount of work, it suddenly turns out that, oh, if we keep moving at that speed, it looks like we'll be able to do more. Again, that's why it's a forecast. And a self-management tool, or which is probably occurring a bit more. Damn, it looks like we will not be able to do it all because our progress shows that we have to eliminate work. So that's what you would expect from a sprint burnout chart. Now, the strangest burnout charts I've seen over the past couple of years, and it's unfortunately a majority of the sprint burnout charts, is that they have this sort of pattern. And let me see whether you recognize it on a daily basis. It with minor fluctuations, it sort of stays up there. That means if you would draw a trend line to it, it will sort of look like this, which is strange because it means no progress, in a way, no movement. So Jamie, you refer to the book that I wrote, Scrum 97 Things Every Scrum Practitioner Should Know. One of the American trainers that contributed was Len Lagestein, and he called it radiating movement. So I like that expression a lot. This does not radiate movement. This is a scary thing. It also means that, in a way, I sort of jokingly sometimes call that's not a sprint burnout chart. That's more like a flat line. That's like sort of your heart rate. It's a flat line. It's what I call a dead team index. This seems like a dead team to me. At least they are not managing themselves. So I went out to look for, to ask questions to those teams, and I found out, why is this happening? Because, you know, around the daily Scrum, they have to update their figures in whatever digital or electronic tool that they're using. So they update their figures, their personal estimates, whatever, in Jira or TFS or whatever. The system spits out something like this, they put it on the wall, and they think they're done. Again, it's not adaptation. They are not adapting. They're not using insights. Yeah? So they just sort of observation, logging, reporting. Now, none of the Scrum events are about reporting or logging. And anyhow, what happens in the sprint stays in the sprint. So let's just embrace reality. Show your real progress. This is sort of like magically hoping that last day of the sprint, you do like this. In a complex environment, it never works like that. It always brings you across, and maybe people enter spillover, or they end up in a situation like they pulled in 10 user stories into the sprint. One story is really done, 8 are like almost done, and 1 hasn't started. That's sort of pointless. That's not managing themselves. I would rather have 5 stories really done and 5 stories totally not started. That's a much, much better situation. And in that sense, to come back to the question that you have, mock programming, whatever, it means that if the system, whatever, the tool spits out a burn chart like this, it means that this team is not using the burn chart to adapt, to look for, can we do more? Yeah, can we uplift this? Should we do less? They're not managing themselves. And it often leads to very painful sprint reviews because nobody knows what is going to be ready or not. Sometimes it's like their sprint is a mini waterfall. They try to integrate all the work at the end, sort of against the idea of, but at least again, inspection without adaptation. So on a daily basis, not even inspecting your actual state, but just logging some data in your electronic tool, that has nothing to do with the purpose of a daily Scrum. The goal of a daily Scrum is for a group of developers to discover on a daily basis, what is our progress, what is working, what is not working, where should we do something else, what should I be working on? Should we go up to the product owner and ask for, hey, what else could we do additionally? Or damn, sorry, dear product owner, but some interface just blew up in our faces unexpectedly. We couldn't have predicted this at the sprint planning. What should we not do from the forecast and still live up to? Should we implement PayPal and all credit card options and paying by check, or should we? What should we not do, or can we do more? Yeah. So that's team index. That's not a sprint burnout chart. That makes no sense. And again, it's one of the effects of not using the daily Scrum as an event to actually look for sensible adaptations. This might mean that they're having too much open work at the same point in time. It might mean that people are not willing to, and that builds on the previous question, might mean that people are not willing to step outside of their function description. No, I'm a tester, and as long as there's no testing work, I will not do anything. Well, the idea of collective accountability, maybe you're there as a group, you can do more than just one trick. You could participate in updating a manual, some documentation, whatever types of things, some analyzing stuff. You could enter pair programming systems where your testing expertise might be used in a different way. There's so much, there's so much we can do. So using this should, in that sense, also be an invitation for people to actually collaborate. So look for adaptations. What is most sensible to do now? Which means then I had planned to do this. I now learned from the group that's not possible. What else can I do to help the group rather than sitting idle and doing nothing?
So one question we had come in, Gunther, is many teams have kind of moved away from the traditional burn down charts for the reasons that you mentioned here. What are your thoughts about work in progress charts, aging work in progress charts, and kind of this new way of measuring progress in a sprint?
Well, anything that works for the team, anything that gives them a good update on the daily status. I don't know about the exact thing that you're meaning. I know a lot of teams that also use something that's called a Scrum board. With at least a couple of columns, meaning your sprint backlog or your product backlog, and then doing and done types of things. Again, whatever works for the team. As long as the only expectation we have from Scrum is on a daily basis, at least on a daily basis, check in with each other, learn, see where you stand so that you can plan your work and that you can potentially talk to the product owner about doing more, doing less, or saying out signal, yeah, we're all sort of on track. Yeah. So anything that works, Scrum doesn't say what you should use. Yeah. We used to say burnout charts, I still like them. Scrum boards too. Another strange thing that I see, sometimes teams do both of them, where I think that is true overhead because they serve the same purpose. And what is essential for me, again, what happens in a sprint stays in a sprint. Nobody outside of the Scrum team or the development team or the group of developers has anything to do with this. This is for the team. This is a self-management tool. Yeah. The only strange thing is that this is not self-management. So I see this pattern also with Scrum boards, and I'm sure that it can happen in any other types of things, where teams, where after 2 days of the sprint, the Scrum board is full of post-its everywhere. So you have no idea where you stand. You have no idea. It's not a representation, a visual representation of your progress. Again, the tool is used as a reporting tool, as a logging tool. Yeah, I'm going to make sure that every little task that I work on is on the board so I can show that I'm safe, that I'm covered. That's not the idea of the tool. That's not the idea of a daily Scrum. It's about collaboration. And I'm sure that those patterns can happen in any tool, whatever tool you use. Yeah. Okay. I just wanted to share because this is such a strange thing. It's even more strange that at the retrospective, people don't talk about this. No, we just had a very annoying, whatever, on the edge of painful review where nobody knew what was going to be ready, what not, where the product owner couldn't sort of proactively work with stakeholders to make sure that they knew what strange things happened in the sprint where we weren't able to do it all and so on. So painful reviews, painful experiences, and then again, inspection without adaptation. Sprint after sprint, having a burnout chart like this, what's more like a dead team metrics rather than. Okay, cool. Thanks for listening to my little picture. So again, sprint backlog should be kept actual. In that sense, have a quick look at your sprint backlog. Outcome of the daily Scrum, should potentially be an updated sprint backlog with an updated visualization of progress. And how you visualize with the tool you just named, Jamie, with the Scrum board, with the burnout chart, I don't care, as long as it serves its purpose. Try to keep it simple, just a way to work with each other. Yeah. Now, another thing that is essential within the sprint, the daily Scrum is not, Scrum uses picture of two loops. Daily Scrum is a small feedback loop within the larger feedback loop that is a sprint. Now, it doesn't stop there. You need good development practices, whatever, how the work is being done. I've got good experiences with things from pair programming. And it actually meant that within the feedback loop of a daily Scrum, we had more feedback loops. From testing, from test-driven development, from test-first implementation, from continuous integration system, from pair programming, from doing functional or UAT, whatever types of testing on a daily basis. So think of a sprint as a combination of a lot of small feedback loops. So again, don't allow your sprints to turn into a mini waterfall. It's about adaptation. It's all those things serve some sense of inspection so that you can adapt and build better things. And as we all know, the ultimate purpose is to, by the end of the sprint, have 2 events to close the sprint. So we start the sprint with sprint planning, so planning for a sprint. We manage ourselves throughout the sprint on a daily, at least on a daily basis, and potentially more frequently, so that by the end of the sprint, you have this thing called sprint review. Now, looking back at my own little history, so at my time, working at Scrum Talk together with Ken, we tried to create something that we called Agility Path. It's a framework to help people use Scrum to adopt Scrum. Like I said, sort of Scrum quad Scrum. They really turned into a big success. Nobody was getting it. I don't use the term Agility Path anymore, but the idea of exploratory management is very important in Scrum. Yeah? And sprint review, what we try to achieve with Agility Path is to get people, managers, stakeholders, whatever, people visiting at least a sprint review, to not look at sort of the performance of the team. Did you do your task? Did you live up to your estimates and on? But focus not just on the output, so not even the performance, not even the output, but the outcome of the work. What is the impact that we're going to have with the work in terms of value? Think back of my definition of Scrum, a simple framework that enables people or to enable people to derive value from complex challenges. You know what complexity is? You know, it has a deep impact. It has also an impact in the sense that you need some sort of simplicity, but also think of the simplicity of Scrum. The goal of the simplicity of Scrum is not to pretend as if the problems are not complex. The simplicity of Scrum is in the fact that it's a lightweight framework with a limited set of rules that we're trying to apply. The ambition is not to reduce or avoid or eliminate the complexity of the challenges. Our challenges will always be complex. They will be difficult. So using Scrum, the goal of Scrum and simplicity is not to pretend as if suddenly our complex challenges are simple. Yeah? Now, the goal of Scrum is also not to just think and act in terms of volume, but try to move towards value. Volume is output, it's how much you do. You can use Scrum to produce a lot more features and still not increase your impact, still not increase customer satisfaction, still not have higher quality on the market, whatever. So think in terms of value. That was our idea of agility path and exploratory management of value. And it should be reflected in the attitude, the spirit, the atmosphere of a sprint review, starting from the inspection. So the question, the inspection, how much potential value has this team or have these teams created in this sprint? Which again builds to the idea what happens in sprint stays in the sprint, and the main units to think of in Scrum terms as an external person, at least external to the Scrum team, is team sprint value. It's not about who did his tasks and estimates and whatever, and who did what sort of work. It's not about the individual performance within the sprint. No, it's about not just the output, but judging the output, assessing the output for its potential outcome, the potential impact. But again, that's only the inspection. Inspection without adaptation, also at the sprint review, is pointless. But this already is a very different type of inspection than just having a quick demo session at the end of the sprint and just running your stakeholders quickly with the demo through the work that you've done. So sprint review is not about justifying for what you've done. It's not about reporting. It's not about logging again. It's about having a collaborative conversation, and not just on a demo, but about what has been done, what has influenced that, what is the potential impact that we might have, that we might be generating with what we've done. And again, it's about closing the loops. That's inspection adaptation. So from the inspection of how much value did you potentially produce towards what can we do to even become better at producing value? What can we do for you as a team so that in the next sprint or the next couple of sprints, you can create even more value or real value? And that's a very different spirit again of a lot of sprint reviews where it's just quickly a demo and then, oh, damn, okay, I understand for this time that you didn't do what you promised you would do. Sort of misconception of the idea of a forecast. And then next sprint, we want you to at least get us 90% of whatever forecast that you're going to make. That's not sort of the conversation you want to have. That's not sort of the adaptation, in quotes, that you're looking for. So sprint review, where it's sort of an expanded version of the daily Scrum. In this case, sprint review is realigning, getting in line with each other, resyncing with each other on what is the most important work that we should probably do in the next sprint and maybe the next couple of sprints, where the daily Scrum has that purpose for the next day of work. This is for the next sprint. And you've got everybody around the table. You've got the development team or the group of developers. You've got the product owner there. You've got the stakeholders there, potentially even users or key users. Everybody around the table realigning. So the adaptation is leaving the event with a sort of being in sync with each other on what is important to do next. And the inspection is not just the increment. The inspection is also information that the stakeholders bring in, information that the users bring in, new changes within the organization, strategic directions, and so on. That's why we organize work in those short cycles called sprints. Because in the sprint, we can have focus on getting things done, but we don't want to spend so much time in the sprint that we might get out of sync, out of line with important changes, disturbances, new insights, outside of our little black box that is called the sprint. So, and that's how Scrum helps us potentially even pivot, do very different things in the next sprint. Yeah? And that's for me the atmosphere of a review. Inspection without adaptation. So it's not for logging, it's not for reporting out, it's not for justifying estimates and tasks and whatever. Yeah, but I did what I needed to do, but that's not helpful. The goal is to at least identify what is most important to do next. And that might be changes, tweaks to what you've just delivered. That might be new things. That might be, I thought this was product on saying, I thought this was going to be really important. But listening to you people now, and what the stakeholders say that maybe is happening, we need the organization, maybe on the market competitors and so on, comparing all of that, oh, it looks like we most valuable work to do next in the next sprint or next couple of sprints is this. It's why the goal, the outcome of sprint review should be an updated product backlog. Updated in the sense that that current state of product backlog reflects what is most important there and then. Like the outcome of daily Scrum at least is an updated sprint backlog with a potential updated visualization. And then after sprint review, we have this retrospective thing. This is a fishbone that I drew from the sort of implementation for Scrum of fishbone I saw in a great book that I liked. Improving Agile Retrospectives, I believe, from Mark Loeffler. It's in the My Cone series. Talked about improving Agile Retrospectives, and I decided to use this fishbone. I liked it because it represents something that I think is very important. Several years ago, I was getting mails from people saying, "Hey, Gunther, what can we do to make our retrospectives more fun?" What do you mean with more fun? You're working with an engaged group of people that have a collective accountability, that all have to know, that can self-organize, that can figure out those things, that build new relationships within the team, that are hopefully eager professionals liking what they do, building products, getting on the market, looking to increase customer satisfaction and increase the outcome. What do you mean with just fun? It sounds so empty almost. Isn't fun engaging with each other, discussing, damn, how was this review? How was this sprint? Did we deliver actually a valuable, releasable increment of product? Yes, no. What can we do to actually do that in the next sprint? Should we expand our definition of done? To be able to do that, if you're able to do that, how can we do it more? Is there any automation that we can implement? How have we been working together in this sprint? How was our feeling as a team? So not just did we deliver the releasable increment? Yes, no, and then decide what to do next, but also how was our work as a team? Why is, I know, strange thing, why is the same person always late for the daily Scrum? Discussing the dead team index rather than the sprint burnout chart. What can we do about this? Might be a limiting whip, might be a suggestion. So limiting the working process is cool, but it shouldn't be an upfront instruction, something that certainly Scrum Masters of the universe, you help teams discover how to deal with those things. That's why you bring them up at the retrospective without telling people how to do that. Make sure that some topics at least surface. Did we meet our sprint goal? Yes, no. Did we have a sprint goal? Didn't we overdo our product backlog refinement again? Yeah, why do we do so much product backlog refinement? Yeah, it helps us limit our sprint planning to just half an hour. No, maybe we should trust ourselves and do less refinement, take a little bit more time at sprint planning to do sort of just-in-time work more. Not get away from the old school waterfall thinking. There's so much you can talk about at the retrospective. What do you mean with a fun retrospective? If that doesn't give you joy, and that if that doesn't give you fun doing this, engaging really in those conversations, be careful. And again, a lot of teams are in a very unsustainable situation. In that sense, sprint is over. They just had a review, again, being bashed or whatever. This is not fun. They want to go home as quickly as possible and try to recover before the next sprint starts. Maybe then that is a topic to talk about at the retrospective. Why are we not able to do this as a sustainable pace at acceptable stress levels, not too low, but also not too high? Talk about those things. That's about engaging as professionals. If that is not fun, then you might be sitting on the wrong chair, honestly. So, and again, it's about discovering things that you want to do differently. So we have this thing, what, how, why for a sprint. We mix them at sprint planning. For whatever reason, it seems that we're separate them by the end of sprint. Sprint review is a lot about the what and the why. Sprint retrospective is about the how in a broader sense. How did it work out with technology, our development practices, test automation, availability of people, presence or absence of the product owner? in order to identify, okay, what are lessons, what are things that we're going to take into how we're going to approach the next sprint. And the how is not just the implementation, not just technicalities, not just technical tasks, also how are we going to work as a team. And then that is used at the next sprint planning, discovering what and why are we going to do this? Hey, keeping in mind, how are we going to do this? The same as the previous sprint, potential improvements, potential changes. And not using the retrospective to think about potential improvements for 6 sprints ahead in time. No. That's way too far. Think in terms of the next sprint so that you can tackle them over there.
So Gunther, would you be, some people are very interested in the fishbone diagram, and I've seen that hanging on your wall, usually behind you,
Yeah.
in many of your other meetups, and I'm also interested as well, but could you give us a brief description of how, or explanation of how you ran this in a retro?
Yeah,
Maybe
so the general idea of a fishbone is to give people like bones, and then ask people to think about, so every bone has a sort of a topic, and then you might have sub bones that might be a bit complicated, but at least think about things that they felt potentially individually important about the sprint that is ending. So and I wanted to give 6 at least recurring topics that I think are important in every retrospective. The first one is, at least, did we deliver a done increment? So was our increment done? Yes, no. And how did we feel as a team? And then people would use this to use, so you would have a real flip chart or a whiteboard somewhere in the room. And maybe give people some time to think for themselves individually what I think about. Do I want to focus on one of the bones or all of them? But at least bring up some topics that they felt are important in the sprint. For better or for worse, meaning positive or not so positive aspects of, yeah, how did I feel about the sprint goal? What made it me feel difficult to achieve the sprint goal? What helped me a lot? And then share those things. And then again, it's about inviting people to have a conversation. Did you achieve the sprint goal? Was the increment actually releasable, in that sense done? Was there also a lot of value in the increment? How did I feel about the value that we produced, the impact, the outcome created? How did I feel that we work as a team? How do I feel we applied our process? So not just the Scrum process, but in general, our way of working together. Anything with impediments that is still hindering or blocking me? So put it on the wall. Allow people to come up with post-its for every bow, and then start discussing those post-its and discover what is most important, what is something that we think we really need to tackle in the next sprint, what is something that sticks out. Maybe everybody comes up to the same point. So it's a way to start up a conversation. Give people topics, the 6 bones in this case. Every bone has a theme, and then start collecting post-its for every bone from people. Does that help, Jamie?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, and I indeed at some point I'm having it on a flip chart and behind me, just to trigger people's attention a little bit. Yeah. So sprint, Scrum, organizing all working sprints. It's all about adaptation. So again, inspection without adaptation is pointless in Scrum, because in a complex world full of changes, full of unexpected events, full of unpredictable events, full of uncertainties, makes no sense to just report out or log about things. It's about continuously being dynamic and looking for changes. And if I would have to translate it, and it's one of the additions of the 3rd edition of my Scrum Pocket Guide, by the way, in the end, I've added an appendix in sharing this sort of little Scrum reference card. It's even a bit more elaborated. But think about those events as opportunities to do a certain inspection, meaning look at certain input, a certain source of observation. Yeah, but don't forget that the ultimate purpose is to think about an adaptation. So for every of those events, sprint planning should leave sprint planning with a selection of product backlog, forecast at least a sprint backlog. In a way, around the daily Scrum, you should have as a team, a group of people, some idea about what are we going to do next, sort of our daily plan reflected in an updated sprint backlog, potentially, or necessarily even visualized, leaving sprint review with an updated product backlog so that everybody leaving the room has a good shared agreement of what is important work to do next, and retrospective actionable improvement, something you want to try out, you want to do in the next sprint with regards to the how.
Excellent. We have just, we actually have, time goes by so quickly when you're having fun.
Yeah.
We have just a few minutes left, so maybe time for a couple questions. I've asked a few as we've gone, but I know there's more out there, so feel free to just unmute yourself, and we'll try to take a couple questions here the last few minutes.
I have one question. You talked earlier about value. I'm wondering, how would you define value? Could you give some examples of what you call value? How do you measure value as well?
Yeah, well, those things are actually quite connected to each other. It's great because value, there is no universal definition for value. So it's good because it means you have to think about it. What do you mean with value? For me, value is outcome impact. Value might be, I see value at least in sort of 3 domains. So so your implementation or adoption of Scrum should deliver in a way, should result in more value for your consumers, your users, the people that actually consume your services or your products, more value for the organization or the enterprise via your stakeholders probably, but also more value for the teams, for the people doing the work. So, and then you might think in terms of value of things like for users, an indication of value might be customer satisfaction, NPS types of things, market share, usage of your applications, and which features are used and how many features are used percentage-wise and so on. But at least customer satisfaction, some idea of customer satisfaction. Value for the organization, certainly in for-profit organizations, that is typically money, something with money in general, something commercial, an advantage, financial benefits, revenues coming in, number of subscriptions increasing, profit increasing in a sort of negative expression, maybe cost cutting, cost reductions might be a financial benefit to the organization. So think of value for your users, satisfaction for the organization, but also for the teams. And again, you've got 2 events, by the end of the sprint, 2 events to quickly look into those things. What and why, value for users, consumers, for the organization, retrospective team engagement, because that's sort of an expression of value. How do we feel as a team? Is this energizing us? Do we feel inspired working in Scrum? Yes, no, why not? What is happening? What could we do more? That's not truly self-organizing. What can we do to become truly self-organizing? Should we try to keep stakeholders out of the room more? So think in terms of value, in terms of outcome, the outcome of your work. To give you a sort of negative example of value, or not value, is you can use Scrum to produce more features more quickly, but still crappy features, not fully tested, release them anyhow. In that sense, you have this idea of doing more, but maybe customer satisfaction is going down. Maybe you're losing customers rather than gaining customers. Maybe your customer retention is not really helping out. So think about, what are you doing with your Scrum? Why? What are you using your Scrum for? Sort of the why of your Scrum. And more volume is not necessarily more value, because you might be producing the wrong stuff. You might be producing systems that are still full of technical debt, that are very complex to maintain and so on, that are not fun for people to work in either. And with people, I mean developers in this case. So examples of value. You can take this further in sense also value and your ability to maintain value. Release frequency, how often can you go to market? How done is your increment actually by the end of every sprint? Because in a way, what is the point of trying to increase your agility, responsiveness, level of adaptation? What is the point of trying to increase your agility by doing short sprints of 2 weeks' time, but then having to deliver your increments to the release department and then taking 5 more weeks to actually put it onto the market? you've created some sort of illusion of agility. So those types of aspects. And also maybe value should also be in the fact that as an organization, you free up time and energy to think about new sources of value. I know a lot of organizations that have not created like really new products for the past couple of 3, 4, 5 years. And even with the existing products, the existing product portfolio, just small tweaks, updates here and there, whatever. How sustainable is that in the long term? So how about value in terms of Scrum? Also finding time and energy and people again to think about new sources of value, new products, innovative things, new markets to enter, rather than just keep circling around in the existing markets. So that is for me some aspects of value. We can spend another time box of 1.5 hours on this. Does that help?
Thank you very much. Yes, it helps. Thank you very much.
And there's a couple of huge management shifts from volume to value. That's huge.
Well, I must say we're out of time, it looks like. That went quickly. Gunther, thank you so much again for coming and sharing your wisdom with us. I learned a lot today. I did paste some links into the chat for, you can rewatch this video on our YouTube live channel. Gunther, are you willing, maybe he's willing to share slides. I can post those somewhere.
Yep.
And,
yeah, I'm going to share a PDF of my PowerPoint anyhow. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. And then all of these links I'll add to our Facebook page. I've pasted a link for that in chat. And again, if you want to save the chat, there's 3 little dots next to where you type your message. You choose that and click Save Chat. So thank you, everyone. It's been a pleasure. Gunther, always a pleasure. I hope that you can join us again in the future.
Thank you, Jamie, for inviting me again. It's great. And it's amazing. We haven't lost too many people, so it's cool.
we did all right. I would like to mention that Gunther has some upcoming courses. Professional Scrum Master. These are scrum.org courses. As I mentioned before, Gunther's a professional Scrum trainer with scrum.org. So I've pasted a link in chat to his future offerings. I know he's got a professional Scrum Master class coming up, as well as a professional Scrum product owner class coming up. So I could not recommend a better person to take those from. So take advantage of that. Thank you, Gunther.
You're welcome. Thank you very much for the invitation. Thank you, everybody, for being here.
Thank you, Gunther. With love from Nigeria.
Yeah, thank you, Alberto.
Alberto.
Yeah, I know.
Nice session. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Stay
Thank
safe.
you, Gunther.
Okay.
I'll see you.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Dankeschön.
Thanks so much. Good to see you. It was really educative. Thank you very much. I learned a lot today.
Okay, cool.
That's my mentee from Nigeria. Thank you, Jamie.
You're welcome, Alberto. Thanks for joining us.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much, guys.
You're very welcome.
Thank
you
Jamie
so much,
for,
Gunther. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank Jamie for inviting me to think about something else and humanizing the workplace.
I love it. It's a great topic. Thank you so much.
Oh, it's actually connected to that.
It is, definitely. Yeah. All right, I'm going to end this meeting. So long, everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, cool. Bye-bye.
Bye.